of St. Ed in 20 minutes or a half an hour or an hour, you know, so all I did was, I went through some old newspapers from the county and Columbus and St. Joseph County in South Bend, Indiana, because we have a lot in common with Indiana. And I just took things that I thought maybe some people might be interested in. But I think the first thing that we need to realize is before St. Edward was here, you had the Native Americans were here long before the white people ever showed up. And in our area, it would mostly be the Pawnee. And so, you know, with that in mind, if you want to know more about the Pawnee, you probably should go down to the Genoa. And Nancy and Jared Carlson is a wealth of knowledge. And the other person that was unfortunately no longer with us was Ron Cruz, a wealth of knowledge. And as much as I'm interested in history, I always thought I would get up, have a chance to visit with him and hear about the things he found on their farm and some on our farm. And I always put it off, and sometimes it's too late then. And it's the way with a lot of things. I wasn't really interested in history when I was younger, but as you get older, it seemed like it kind of clicked. And if you're into maybe a little bit of family history, or you're into puzzles or things like that, this is something you can kind of delve into as much as you want, put it away for a while, and then get back to it again. But anyway, the Native Americans were here first, and when Nebraska was kind of first a state, we actually had Boone County, and we had the Pawnee Reservation just to the south, just a few miles, Nance County. And you might have seen some of these pictures of the Native Americans, you know, doing what they're doing, and you don't see too many trees. I'm not a historian on the Pawnee, but I'm sure that they use these once in a while. Would you say, Denny?
Sure.
Sometimes. But most of the time they were in the villages was look more like this. Kind of like that.
So what was the time frame with those pictures?
Well, you know, these probably had to be taken, the first photographs was probably in the 1860s, because I know they had photographs of the Civil War. So I would imagine these could be from the 1860s. I'm just guessing. Because then after that, we kind of ravaged the area. And then I know I was talking about, then you went, as people settled, then you had things like this, the sod houses. And Denny Cruz, we visited, and he said that on his grandpa's farm, right? Correct?
Yeah, where Ty lives now.
Had a sod house there by the Bogus.
It's Betty's relatives.
Some of your relatives?
It
Okay.
had belonged to the Webbs on the website.
Okay, and Virginia, my wife, said her mom lived as a child in a sod house in
Around Stapleton.
Stapleton, Nebraska. Actually lived in a sod house.
From what I understood, the inside of the walls, there was sod. When, who fixed that for you? From Columbus. Anyway, when he was hunting, he found that there was sod inside the walls.
So anyway, that kind of brings us up to, well, actually when the Pawnee were still here, we're getting around to the St. Edward, but the town's name is actually one of the most unique in the way it was named. Most towns around in the state of Nebraska and around the country, they name it because of the river or natural environment, hills or mountains or something, or it could be the president or somebody important in the area. But St. Ed kind of chose a different route, and it dates back to the year about 1000 AD. And that was, and I won't spend too much time on it, but the King of England spent time in exile when he was a child in France. And after a while, he could go back to England and he became King of England. And he did good things, and people really liked him. And then later on, he was sainted, and it was the first king in England to be sainted. So it was Saint Edward. So, and this is a few pictures that I stole off the internet of what he might have looked like. And there's a tapestry in Bayeux, France, and it's, I don't know how long it is. It's from here across the street, a tapestry that they made. And we've seen it, and they have a part of the picture, it tells a story. It's kind of like a moving picture, except you just walk along and it tells a story. And one of the stories that it has on there is the funeral procession of King Edward, and it's on the tapestry.
Hmm.
And when was he king?
About 1045 or something like that. So when he died, he was instrumental in starting Westminster Abbey. And it was shortly afterwards he died, and his tomb is in Westminster Abbey. So, that's St. Edward. Well, then you fast forward a bunch of years, and like about 800 years, and there is a Reverend Edward Frederick Sorin, and he's a French-born priest, and he came to America. He had a deep desire to be an American, and his attachment to the new country. And he started Notre Dame. He started Notre Dame University. So, this is a picture of him. So, anyway, he came to South Bend, Indiana area, and the first person that he met was the Colliard. Colliard was the last name, and that's going to be very important because, in my opinion, this town could have very well be named Colliard. Because when this Ed Sorin came to South Bend, the Colliards, the dad had actually founded South Bend, Indiana, and planted it. He was a fur trader by his profession when he was younger, and he was very influential and well respected in the area. And he had a son who was the first person to meet Reverend Ed Sorin, that came by boat and buggy and walked and stuff in the almost wintertime. He met him, and they invited him, Edward Sorin, to their house because they didn't have any place to stay, and they became great friends. So, and the Colliards, if you delve into anything that looks anything like a wagon that the oxen and horses would pull, well, it's the Colliard Wagon Works from South Bend, Indiana, very famous. And at one time in 1865, they were putting out 3,000 wagons per year, and they had 2,000 acres of timber in that area. So, and this Colliard was actually the owner of large tracts of land in Michigan, Iowa, Nebraska, and some of the territories. And this is a picture of the Colliard, A.T. Colliard. The very confusing thing when I was researching this is, this name is A.T. Colliard. His son was named A.T. Colliard. His nephew was named A.T. Colliard. And half the time I didn't know who they were talking about, to be quite honest with you. So anyway, it's a relative. Okay, it was also, it's like, in this day and age, it's like if you have rich friends, you tend to hang out together, and the people that, they get things done. So he had friends. This was a Longley, and he became later on treasurer of the St. Edward Land and Immigration. This is John Lederer. And he formed a partnership with A.T. Colliard and the Longley. Imagine that, Colliards, Longley, and Lederer. They purchased large tracts of land in Boone County, Nebraska, platted and laid out the village of St. Edwards. In August of 1876, they formed a stock company known as the St. Edwards Land and Immigration Company. Mr. Lederer was elected at the first meeting vice president for the term of 5 years. So, that brings us to, how did they get that land? Union Pacific Railroad. And so the homestead, what the government did is they gave the railroad every other section of land, 20 miles on either side of the railroad. Well, the railroad here was down in the Platte Valley. And guess where 20 miles took you? Right here. Right here. So, what the government did is they gave every other section to the railroad. And the railroad could do whatever they want with it. They could sell it. And then the government would have the other section and they could sell it. So, it was a win-win for the railroad because they put the railroad in and then they sold a little bit of land. Well, then they knew that they was going to have business on the railroad. So it was kind of a win-win for everybody except the Native Americans. That wasn't so good for them. So anyway, and then we had the Homestead Act of 1862, which gave 160 acres of public land to any head of the household who lived on the land for 5 years. And that also meant, though, that they didn't have to live on it year-round. They could take 6 months off. And that's why a lot of people would come here, work the land, and then take 6 months off. It's kind of like what some of the farmers that don't have livestock do to this day. Isn't that the way it goes? Anyway, they also had, and I run across this, I didn't know they had this. The Timber Act was passed in 1873, and that allowed homesteaders to get another 160 acres of land if they planted 1/4 of it, 40 acres, to trees. So, and this, you can't really see this. This is one from Kansas, but you see that stripe that goes across there? That's the 20 miles going across Kansas. Nebraska had the same thing along the Platte River, like Interstate 80 would kind of be. And then they went out and they put up a lot of posters like this. Whereas, it's like, and all this stuff will be available afterwards. You want to look at it. It was, there are millions of acres for sale. And then this was Nebraska, Garden of the West. 50 million acres, grazing and farmland, or grain and grazing land.
Do you know what year those posters are?
They'll probably be in the 1860s, because, just before Nebraska became a state.
And then
So-
the painting, you're getting to that?
No, I'll get to that.
Okay, sorry.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
Okay.
Good thing I got these kind of in order. I'm kind of going a little bit from oldest to kind of newest, and I've just picked out some things and I've highlighted a few things. And this was in the in November of 1871. That would have been about the year somebody started settling here. And it says in this one, it was a Boone County correspondence. I'm not sure where I found this one. It says a gentleman from South Bend, Indiana, will locate a colony of about 100 families on the Union Pacific Railroad lands in the southeast part of the county. Gee, I wonder where that would be.
Yeah.
And will erect it says woolen mill. I'm not sure that was correct. In the course of 2 or 3 years in the town. So then in 1874, I found an article, you know, at first we were named Beaver, and then it was Waterville, and then it was St. Edward. Well, I actually found this one of importance because it's from the Columbus Journal, and it was a letter to the editor, kinda, and we see a column of the journal items from Waterville Post Office. So this is July 1st of 1874. This was still named Waterville in 1874. And that same year, in 1874, this is July 1st, it also says, we are expecting to have a grand celebration on the 4th of July at this place. Mr. Loren Clark has kindly granted his grove for the occasion, which is really the only nice grove on the Beaver Creek for such gatherings as picnics and etc. So if you had trees, you were probably in high demand.
So how many years, Francis, were we Beaver or Watertown before we became St. Ed?
I'm not exactly sure, but I think we became St. Ed in about 1874, 5, somewhere in there.
And town was settled in what?
Well, they drove stakes in 1871. A
Okay.
few people were kind of here. So, the other one that's of interest is, this is from St. Joseph Register in South Bend, Indiana, June 3rd of 1875. It says, and the headline is, St. Edwards, South Bend's Nebraska suburb. Its prospects, interview with Mr. S.S. Case. And in all reality, for what Virginia and I have tried to find out, that the Cases are probably one of the first people that could be still from the very first founding fathers of this community. So it goes on, and this is from the South Bend Register, and it says, learning that Mr. Case, an old resident of South Bend, has recently returned from a 2-week visit at St. Edwards, a Nebraska town organized sometime by a gentleman of this city, in which its rapid growth and general prosperity has excited considerable interest among our citizens. And then it goes, they asked Mr. Case a question, and he says, about his impressions. He says, I was very, very favorably impressed from the first, the wonderful stretch of country covered with luxuriant vegetation rolling away as far as the eye could be, surprised and delighted me. The soil is almost universally good and finely adapted to grain and stock raising. I guess he was pretty right on that. And this is from March 7th of 1878, the South Bend Daily Tribune. Gentlemen, I desire through the columns of your paper to say a few words to my friends who regard to my late trip to Nebraska, to land to which so many are winding their sway this spring. I don't know what that is. By the way, I wish to observe that we found almost everywhere through the country ex-South Benders, all of whom reported themselves well pleased with the West. And this is from the April 18th of 1878 in the South Bend Tribune. This is on the last visit to St. Edwards. A.T. Colliard, president of the St. Edward Land and Immigration Company, offered a handsome present to the first male child born in the town, and one day last week he was called upon to fulfill his promise, the lucky baby having been born to the wife of Byron K. Smith. Mr. Colliard accordingly sent the little stranger, in the name of the company, a silver table set composed of knife, fork, and spoon contained in a handsome case. So he was not only a wealthy person, he was also generous and took care of his interest. Him and his associates did make many trips to St. Edward to check on their investment. Another one, in that same year of 1878, says an immigrant from Iowa reported that he had passed 13 wagons on the road to Boone County, hailing from Wisconsin. And A.T. Colliard, president, and W. Longley, member of the St. Edward Land and Immigration, had arrived in Boone County, the business interests of the company calling them west. And this is a little bit of a note that was in the article a few years later, but they were actually, it's kind of like a blast from the past. And it was, getting back to Alexis Colliard, it said that on Father Sorin, Edward Sorin, first visit to Notre Dame, he came to South Bend, was ferried across the St. Joseph River in a common rowboat by the late Alexis Colliard, then a mere lad. So, they had these homesteads out here. Well, you had to be on them for a while and you had to do certain things. And if you didn't, then you got a legal notice that you should appear in court. And they're probably gonna take the land away from you. So this one was for, against Nels M. Johnson for abandoning his homestead, entry number dated September 19th, 1877. The north half, and they describe it in Platte County. He's summoned to appear, alleged abandonment. So, you know, and I suppose things haven't really changed too much. In this day and age, if you have a farmer that wants to grow his land, he's always out for more land. In this day and age, it gets bigger. Well, even in that day, if you saw somebody that had a homestead and they had abandoned it, if you was like that land better than yours or wanted to add on, you could probably get his land. And so I'm sure people got turned in for abandoning. And you know, when I say abandoning, they did have a leeway. They could go away for 6 months and come back. This is another one from 1875. Yeah, and it's just what I said. He was allowed 6 months at a time of absence from the homestead. And this gentleman filed for his son that was 15 years old a timber claim. Once again, I don't know how many times I run across, this one is from 1883 South Bend Tribune. In 1878, the South Bend colony in Nebraska, better known as St. Edwards, is prospering finely. It now contains a post office, 2 stores, a hotel, 2 blacksmith shops, and a splendid 3-run merchant flouring mill with all the modern improvements, a doctor and a harness maker. Town is growing daily. And then another one, Charles Smith returned from St. Edward, Nebraska, and will remain all winter. He reports the South Bend colony very prosperous. And now, I gotta take a break. We get to the painting.
Okay.
So, you know, if you wanted to advertise your land for sale, I guess you can go take a picture of it, but how many people is gonna, if you wanted a picture of St. Ed, you'd have to send somebody. You know, it isn't like nowadays where you get on the internet and it's done. So, a few years ago, we were contacted by a gentleman from Chicago. The reason we were contacted because years ago when our son Jesse and some of his friends did the webpage for St. Edward, Nebraska, our name was put on the website. And this gentleman contacted me and he said he had 2 paintings. And it said where he got them from. And he told me about them, and he said he wondered if these were supposed to be of St. Ed. And I said, well, what does it look like? And he says, well, does your town have a stream? And I said, yeah. And I said, does it have some hills? Yeah, it's got all that. And then we talked a little bit about it, and he says, well, so this is what it was. It says from the John Lederer estate. That was one of the people of the St. Edward Land and Immigration, purchased by Dr. Thomas Brown in 2002 from that estate. And then it says that John Lederer was born in Bavaria in 1833, settled in South Bend, became a partner in retail grocery business, and then he partnered with 2 other gentlemen, and one of them was Colliard, to purchase large tracts of land in Boone County, where the village of St. Ed is now located. The town is named in honor of Edward Soren's patron saint, St. Edward the Confessor. And Father Soren was the first president of Notre Dame University. These paintings are said to have been hung in John Letter's office in South Bend, Indiana, to encourage land investors. So, I kind of believed it, and one day, I hit the jackpot.
Did you jump?
Yeah, Virginia was not at home, and I called her. I said, I couldn't believe this. November 9th, 1881, some beautiful paintings. Mr. A.T. Colliard has on exhibition in his real estate office 2 very handsome paintings of Western scenery, which are unusually fine works of art. The paintings present 2 views of St. Edward, Nebraska, and are 30 by 40 inches in size. They show the situation of the town to be most picturesque and give a better idea of the place than could be obtained in any other way except by a visit. Mr. Colliard had the paintings made for the benefit of people who contemplate buying in St. Edward and will be found of great help in the selection of lots. So that is one of the 2 paintings that I own. The person from Chicago offered to St. Edward the paintings, and he said, does any group want to buy them or anything, because he was going to dispose of them. And he kind of needed to know, and I talked to Virginia, and we said we would just buy them ourselves. The price of the paintings wasn't that expensive, but shipping them was not cheap. And so there's another one that I have at home, and it's similar, but not quite the same. But so this was actually hanging in their office specifically. This is one of the original things of St. Ed that they used for promotion.
Is that the northwest part of town?
Yes. So I couldn't believe my luck that I actually found proof that he had that done, and I'm going like, yeah, that looks, I didn't get my tape measure out, but I'm going, I think that's about 30 by 40. So, okay, getting a little bit further, we're up to about 1884 now. On December 5th, now the train, I think, got here in about 1880 through St. Ed, I think, somewhere around in that. So on the 5th of December, the train brought to St. Ed from Illinois 75 head of superior grade cattle, including 15 head of thoroughbred horses and 3 very handsome thoroughbred short-horned bulls. Property of L.S. Dorman, L.C. Thompson, Howard, and DeVore. And then also was Poland China hogs they received at the same time, and are registered in an Illinois Poland China herd book. So they were serious. They were getting, and the railroad was bringing things in. And I just found this, and this is for Vicky. In 1887, November 4th, if 50 or more persons will agree to pay a membership fee of $2, a library of standard works of history, biography, poetry, and better class of fiction will be placed here. That's
What year was that?
1887. And then it goes on to say, Mr. A.M. Weinbrenner, representing the Chicago Library Company, will make a personal canvass of the town. So he's going to